Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the horror animation films from 2023, titled Stopmotion. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens with a young woman named Ella, who's a stop-motion animator. She is seen working on a project while her mother, Suzanne, gives her instructions. It is revealed that Suzanne is respected as a legend in this work, and she hopes her daughter will follow in her footsteps. After they're done, Suzanne checks the work, but claims it's not good enough, which upsets Ella a bit.
I need to do it again.
It turns out that her mother is suffering from arthritis, which affects her ability to move her hands properly. Because of this, Ella is responsible for caring for her in every aspect, including their filmmaking projects. During dinner, she mentions to Suzanne that she has an idea for a movie, but the latter doesn't seem interested. The next morning, when Ella wakes up, she finds her mother waiting for her. She asks her about the idea she mentioned the previous night. Ella is thrilled and tries to say something, but she becomes too nervous to utter even a single word. After a long day of work, Ella heads to a pub to meet her boyfriend, Tom, and his sister, Polly. Tom is a struggling musician trying to make it big, while Polly works as a stop-motion artist in a filmmaking studio. As they chat, Polly shares a video of her recent animation project with the group. Despite feeling a bit jealous, Ella compliments Polly on her work. Afterward, Ella spends time at Tom's place, and as morning approaches, she asks Tom to take her home before her mother wakes up. During the drive home, Ella confides in him about her mother's declining health, and how she's helping her make her final film. Tom asks if she wants to pursue her own filmmaking goals and discover her own voice, but an upset Ella claims that she doesn't have her own voice. After returning home, she collapses onto her bed. But her moment of rest is interrupted when Suzanne arrives and tells her it's time to work. Later, when they eat together, she deliberately neglects to cut her mother's steak. This makes it difficult for Suzanne to cut and eat her food with her weak hands. Afterward, the two sit down to work, and Suzanne claims that she just wants to finish the movie before she dies, and asks if it's such a burden. Suzanne begins to give the work instructions, but she gradually becomes more aggressive. Suddenly, the lights start flickering, before a short circuit blows out the lights, leaving the room completely dark. Ella turns on a torch, and notices her mother on the floor, who collapses soon after. In the next scene, we see Suzanne admitted to the hospital, where she falls into a coma. The doctor asks if she had a stroke before, and Ella mentions her arthritis, and that the mother doesn't even look real. Later, she goes to stay with Tom, who assures her that she can stay with him for as long as she needs. After taking a bath, Ella sees a vision of her mother lying on the ground, who suddenly transforms into a strange meat puppet. She snaps back to reality, and informs Tom that she must complete her mother's final project. The following day, Tom takes Ella to a rundown building where she can stay temporarily. He explains that very few people live here, ensuring she can work peacefully. Among the numerous empty units, Ella is drawn to one particular flat, and expresses her desire to stay there. After Tom leaves, she begins settling in, and carries her luggage upstairs. Ella meets a little girl on the stairs who tries to talk to her, but she ignores her. In the evening, she completes her workspace setup and resumes work on her mother's project. While trying to focus, Ella hears the little girl singing and gets annoyed. She walks outside to confront her, and meets her in the hallway. The girl peeps inside Ella's flat, and inquires about her setup. Despite her initial annoyance, Ella lets her in. Ella eagerly demonstrates how she makes a film by moving the model again and again, and clicking the picture. The girl asks Ella why she does it, to which Ella replies because she likes it, and it feels like she's bringing something to life. She also shares with her the storyline she's currently working on, which is her mother's final movie. However, the girl isn't impressed by this narrative, and claims it's a bit boring. She insists she has a better story, and then shares a story about a scared girl, who gets lost in the forest, while being pursued by a mysterious entity. Suddenly, the girl asks Ella about what she's holding. Ella explains that it is mortician's wax, which is used to cover up dead people's injuries when their families want to see them. The girl says she should definitely make a character out of it, and she asks the girl to leave. In the next scene, Ella sees a vision in which she finds herself in a forest. She soon becomes unconscious, and is awakened by Tom in the morning. To her surprise, Ella discovers that her mother's creation has been destroyed, and replaced by the little girl's story from the night before. The setting has transformed into a forest, and the main character is crafted from a mortician's wax. She watches the video on her laptop, which she doesn't recall filming at all. Ella assumes that she did it before falling asleep and simply forgot about it. She is actually impressed by the new story, so she decides to abandon her mother's project, and work on this one instead. In the afternoon, Polly arrives to meet Ella, and extends a job offer to work at her company. Ella doesn't accept her offer, but shows her the new project she's working on, and Polly appears to be very impressed. After Polly departs, the little girl returns to the studio once again. Ella excitedly presents her the new project based on the story the girl shared earlier. However, the girl isn't impressed, and comments that the doll representing the girl in the woods doesn't look real enough. She goes into the kitchen, brings a steak, and asks Ella to make the girl out of it. Ella agrees to give it a try, and is surprised to find that the doll now appears more lifelike than before. She narrates more of the story, explaining how the scared girl finds a cabin in the forest, and hides there. She adds that the scary man comes 3 nights, and then knocks on the door. They create the antagonist of the story using raw meat as well, and the girl suggests the scary man be called the Ash Man. Around midnight, Ella senses someone knocking at her apartment door. To her surprise, it's the little girl who has arrived with another suggestion. She takes Ella outside into the woods, and shows her a fox carcass. She suggests they should use the fox flesh to give the Ash Man a more realistic appearance. Hearing this, Ella is horrified and refuses to incorporate such a hideous idea. However, the girl insists that unless Ella complies, she won't reveal the rest of the story. Ella isn't bothered, it's her movie, and she will create her own story. Following this, Ella tries to think of the next plot line, but she struggles to come up with what happens next. Frustrated, she visits and tells a comatose Suzanne that she has started a new project, but in reality, it's not even hers, it belongs to someone else again. Afterward, she goes to meet Polly at the club, and asks her for some drugs, hoping it might help her get creative. After taking them, Ella begins to experience a trippy, psychedelic episode. She's making love with Tom, while rubbing and feeling his skin, as if she would do something with it. Ella then wanders outside in a dazed state, and feels the blood of a man involved in a bar fight. Just then, the little girl shows up at the bar, and Ella begins to follow her in a confused state. The two arrive in the woods again, and this time, she takes the girl's suggestion to bring the fox carcass back home. Using the flesh of the dead animal, she crafts a new Ash Man, and replaces the old one. The little girl then continues the story, explaining that on the first night, the lead girl is in the house, and the Ash Man is coming. She tries to hide, but he eventually sees her. As Ella is trying to film the animation, she hears the buzzer in her house goes off. Ella steps outside to investigate, only to notice the life-sized version of the Ash Man heading upstairs. Horrified, she rushes back to her apartment, and locks herself inside. But then, the following morning, she is awakened by Tom. He asks if she took something last night. But surprisingly, she finds the drugs package and realizes she didn't actually touch it. Horrified, she tells Tom that her animated character came to life and chased her last night. They check her laptop, and discover that she had shot an animated scene last night. Terrified, Ella decides to abandon her work and leave the studio. In the next scene, Ella is at Tom's place. Suddenly, she notices that her skin has transformed into wax, but returns to normal seconds later. She then goes to sleep, but abruptly wakes up and realizes she can't move her body. Then, Ella notices the girl from her story walking toward her. The girl begins to gruesomely rip out Ella's thighs. The next morning, Ella is still disturbed, so Tom assures her that what happened in her apartment was just a result of her imagination. However, we see that she is distracted by the girl sitting on the table behind Tom. Ella then goes to the restroom, but the girl follows her and asks if she does not want to hear the rest of the story. Ella says she's no longer interested in that project, but the girl continues the story, claiming that on the second night, the Ash Man touches the lead girl. Afterward, Tom suggests that Ella should consider checking out the job offer at Polly's studio. The following day, Ella starts working at Polly's stop-motion production company, and Polly introduces her to the director. Ella had thought she'd been hired as an animator, but she discovers she's only tasked with making eyeballs for the figurines. During lunch break, Ella wanders around the company, and stumbles upon Polly and the director in a room. But to her surprise, she sees a setup for a story that looks exactly like her own of the scared girl. It turns out Polly took her story, but Polly says it's not exactly the same, she was just inspired by it, and she even offers to pay money. However, Ella becomes furious and starts destroying the puppets, so the director has to kick her out of the company. Later, in the hospital, Ella is clicking photos of her mother by moving her hand again and again. Suddenly, she hallucinates Suzanne talking, who comments that it's a wonderful medium to bring dead things to life. Ella then asks what happens when the puppets take on a life of their own. In response, the mother reminds Ella that she will always be a puppet, and once puppets are done with their play, they're put back in a box. When Ella returns to her apartment, the girl continues the story, saying that on the second night, Ashman returns to the cabin and touches her. However, Ella is not satisfied with this storyline, and insists that the scared girl should escape from the Ash Man and run away. The girl says she can't change it, but Ella asserts that it's her story and she has the final say. She then begins shooting the animation, but suddenly everything around her starts shaking. To her horror, she notices the human-sized Ash Man gradually growing larger and emerging from the set. Ella suddenly becomes doll-sized, and attempts to flee, while the Ash Man pursues her. She spots a small gap and jumps into it, but she discovers a strange room on the other side, and realizes she's stuck in the hole. Eventually, the Ash Man catches up to her, and corners her. He spits something resembling an egg out of his mouth, picks it up, and proceeds to feed it to her. In a dazed state, she sees the little girl mocking her for trying to change the story. Next, we see Ella in the hospital, where the doctor informs her that she was found wandering near her building, and asks if she remembers how she got the cut on her leg, but she doesn't. She then tells a worried Tom that she didn't do this on purpose, and notices Polly anxiously sitting outside. Seeing this, Tom tells Ella to stop the project and suggests she work on his music videos instead, but Ella smiles, and claims that he is not a real musician. Tom is offended and he insists he was only trying to help, which she doesn't appreciate. He argues that her project has gone too far, and he's going to dismantle it, but Ella pleads with him not to do so. She promises to do it herself since she's the one who started it. Tom agrees but insists they'll do it together, and he'll be back the next morning with the apartment key. Up next, Ella receives the unfortunate news that her mother has passed away. The little girl also shows up at the hospital, and tells Ella that they must finish the story. Afterward, the duo break into Ella's flat using a fire extinguisher. The little girl remarks that the fox meat has dried out and they now need something more bloody. Ella then calls the girl to sit with her on the couch, and she suddenly becomes violent and starts choking her. After some time, when she feels that the girl is dead, she moves back. But seconds later, the girl again shows up behind Ella, unharmed and alive. Here Ella begins crying as she realizes that she cannot escape her fate. She is worried about what will happen to the lead girl on the third night, so the little girl asks Ella not to be scared and promises that it will be worth it. Next, the girl demands a bloodier remake of the Ash Man, and suggests Ella integrate part of herself into her creation. Hearing this, Ella takes painkillers, and removes stitches from her leg one by one. She starts to pry open her wound with her fingers and tries to rip off her flesh. While she is doing so, Polly and Tom arrive at her apartment and are horrified to see her. They try to stop her from hurting herself, and Ella passes out for a moment. The two attempt to take her to the hospital, but Ella suddenly wakes up and kicks Polly in the face. She then pushes Tom down the stairs. Up next, Ella proceeds to attack her, and ultimately kills Polly by piercing her throat with a camera tripod. She then approaches Tom on the stairs, who is injured and pleading for help. But Ella doesn't show him any empathy, and finishes him off as well. Following this, she brings their dead bodies back to her flat, and the girl says this is even better. She asks her to cut the flesh from Polly's thigh to make the models for her film. After this, we see that Ella has created 2 life-sized figures from their flesh. She becomes dazed and, at this moment, Ella notices that her characters have come to life, and are moving on their own. The Ash Man starts approaching the scared girl, but suddenly, he turns towards Ella and moves towards her. Seeing this, the little girl begins to panic and tells Ella that this is not part of the story. Ella then locks herself in the closet, but the Ash Man soon infiltrates it and stares at her. Despite being scared to death, she doesn't have the energy to defend herself anymore. Her face suddenly transforms into Mortician's wax, and she offers it to the Ashman, who begins consuming it, and then we see the Ashman devouring Ella. In the final scene, Ella returns to the woods and walks toward the cabin, which is similar to the one from her film. Inside the cabin, she sees the little girl watching the finished movie. Ella is seen bleeding and dying in her apartment in the screen. The little girl tells her that she loved the film, and Ella smiles at her. After this, Ella steps into a nearby crate, and closes the lid. And this is where the movie ends. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.